Hello UKNOF. I guess this is a talk that's kind of a bit of a coming-of-age story. Faelix is a small, I guess, boutique ISP who we've been going for 10 years, but initially we started doing a lot of consultancy, helping other people push packets, and this sort of is like I say, it's a coming-of-age story of where we got to on a couple of projects of ours. To tell you a little bit about us, we have kit in a couple of data centers, one down the road, one abroad in Geneva, and we started out with customers mostly in the UK, based around here, and we ended up with a few more customers up and down the country, and then we started getting more customers elsewhere, and it started to become a little bit of a challenge, remembering who everybody is, who's allowed to call us about what we do for them, all the circuit numbers and so on, and everybody tries to make some sort of a system to deal with this. So that was one of the sort of ideas in the melting pot that drove this project. Other ideas actually came from, well, here. I have to say a huge thank you to all of the speakers that have given talks, because a lot of the motivation and inspiration came literally from this room. For example, Neil gave a talk a couple of years ago where he said the point of UKNOF is very much about the sharing of ideas. Just very recently, in January, Brian Nisbet gave a talk about incident response, effectively. When something goes down, how long do you have before the phones start ringing? How long do you have to actually either try and fix the problem or at least know what you're talking about when the phones ring? And that very much echoed the sort of thoughts that we were having at Faelix about how to manage customers and know what we're doing. I'd like to say thank you to Andy. It was his talk in Sheffield. It was here a couple of years ago, where he talked about software-defined networks, where software is literally constructing network infrastructure, and that's very much what my use of SDN is in my title of this talk. It's about orchestration rather than about open flow, packet pushing and so on. And I suppose the last talk I want to say, sort of thank you for inspiration, was Facebook's, where they talked about the network monitoring system they have to try and automate as much fault resolution as possible. And while that might not be achievable at the scale we are, it very much was the kind of, I guess, concept car version of what we might try to do in our own tiny little ISP. The last idea in all of this came from some work we were doing for a few customers for whom we provide hosting. 3 of them approached us a couple of years ago asking about CRMs, and that was an idea that was in the back of my head. How do we make our own systems better, based on the sort of things that some of our customers are doing in their sort of more outreach-based work. And that sort of sets the background for what my project and what the point of this talk is. To sort of call back to Facebook's title, I'd like to refrain Dr. Strangelove, how I learned to stop worrying and love the CRM, but I get the feeling nobody here really loves CRM. So maybe it should be how I learned to stop worrying and love the configuration management database. My previous job, I used to work in the NHS, and I was trained up in ITIL, and I'd just like a quick show of hands. Who knows what ITIL is? ITIL? Keep your hand up if you like ITIL. I get the feeling nobody likes ITIL, apart from a very few people do.
Bits of it.
Bits of it, absolutely. There are some bits of it that are brilliant, and quite a lot of controversy comes from this thing called the configuration management database. For those of you who don't know what ITIL is, it's a service management framework. It's a cool pin badge and a qualification and a line on your CV. But it's very much around how to look at things like capacity planning. We heard about that in the talk about superfast broadband. Incident management, finance, keeping your systems running. The center of all of this is a database, the CMDB, into which you slot everything about your so-called configuration items. And it is this glorified monster project, potentially, that anecdotally, organisations spend maybe months or even man-years trying to populate and build. How can a tiny little ISP devote any time to that when really most of the time we spend is trying to chase customers and make sure we're delivering a good service and expand? Not least because, as a sort of small starting up ISP, you probably begin by getting, I don't know, Nagios installed, maybe some systems for getting information out of your routers. You have a billing system. You've got to keep things up to date in the right DBs. Your IMAP folder is probably the repository of all of your information about customers. I mean, how many times do we just search our inbox for, oh God, what was that circuit number we're talking about? We'll have orchestration tools for spinning up servers, for managing servers. There'll be random scripts. Somewhere you might have a database or a spreadsheet of what hardware isn't or isn't in warranty and what needs upgrading. Customer control panels, help desk systems, lists of contracts. Somehow, maybe all of this needs to talk to each other. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe this needs to feed into the CMDB. And then what happens when the phone rings? Where do you first look? And this was, again, harking back to Brian's talk, this was the sort of, I guess, the thing that crystallized the idea. Where do we first look if a customer calls up? Do we look in the help desk system? Do we look at our Nagios showing red? Do we even know what the thing is that they're calling about? Because what the customer says versus what we see on Nagios will potentially be very, very different. So I did what any sort of software network tech person would do, which is to write some code. Which the idea is, of course, automate everything, minimize the amount of time you spend doing things. The reality is perhaps it's an ongoing project that never finishes. To tell you a little bit about how we ended up using CRM as our configuration database, well, here it is at the middle. Fundamentally, we needed something that was a really flexible database, a really sort of schema-free database, and CRMs are a kind of off-the-shelf thing that do that quite well, it seems. So you might have some sort of document or other for an organization, somebody who's going to buy some services from you. And there's going to be some sort of a service that you buy. And within that, there's going to be some sort of a relationship. Harking back again to the sort of relational management sort of theme of CRM. There's going to be people who work at those organizations, and some of them are allowed to talk to you about certain things. We service quite a lot of design agencies and so on, and quite often you find within them, although it's one organization, there are teams who are working on different projects, and they can't talk to you about different systems, even though they work at the same place, because internally their organization has a sort of firewall between those teams. So here is our CRM at the very, very beginning when we started using it. Initially, this was just for communication with our customers and for support and billing. These were the sort of two core features that we wanted to use the CRM for. Pretty quickly, we needed to do the sort of information gathering exercise. This is the piece of work that takes months in large organizations. And having spoken with a few people who are in this room, the general feeling is the sooner you do this, the better you will all feel, because the less work it'll be. From that, we wanted to get as much live, real information into our CRM as possible via various APIs. So what is our estate? What are we running? What's on our switches? What circuits, virtual circuits have we provisioned? What things have we got in DNS, for example? And in the case of some of our customers where we provide a part managed service, we actually have an agent that can run on the VMs themselves, so we actually have an idea of what they're hosting. The idea being when they phone up and say website or whatever, www.example.com is down, we actually know what server they're referring to, because as a service provider, we might actually have no idea. From that, we've started offering up a sort of control panel, the typical control panel that you might see for a hosting or service provider, but we're actually just interfacing that directly into the CRM, literally just pull stuff out via API, pop it up on a web page. The customer sees exactly what their machine is and how we see it. The natural sort of progression from that is let's try actually spinning up services from the CRM. And this is something we've not yet done. I'll come back to why in a moment. But very much that is the next part of our project, how we can actually spin up services and make it easier for example, part-managed customers or so on. So the CRM very much now becomes the center of our network. Anything we need to turn up, a new virtual circuit or whatever, the idea is it goes into the CRM. We know it's going to be billed, we know it's going to be monitored, and we know it's going to be enabled. Of course, there are going to be some ad hoc scripts, things like talking to the RIPE database to populate IP address allocations and so on. We're a heavy user of Salt Stack in our provisioning for both VMs and for managed services within a lot of those VMs. And again, we're driving that now from the CRM, our CMDB. And as I already alluded, network monitoring. If the machine exists, if this service is up, if there is an IP address we've allocated and somebody's paying for it, it should already be being monitored. And so we're driving our network monitoring from that. But then our network monitoring is actually sending the alerts back into the CRM as part of that customer's record. And potentially we could actually just use our CRM to communicate that to the customer there and then. You know, send them a newsletter, we've noticed something is wrong with your service. Or let them see that in their control panel. And the idea behind this is to keep us honest to our service level agreements. Should we actually have an outage, we'd like to make it very easy within our billing platform to acknowledge that and to keep us honest. Where have we got to? Well, I'm quite pleased that we've actually got to the stage where the state of our network and our hosting infrastructure estate and what's in the configuration management database kind of align. They are reflections of each other. We now know basically the gaps where, for example, we might not have been billing people for services we'd forgotten about or little things that had been configured as a freebie goodwill thing that maybe we need to account for properly. And we are starting to roll all of that visibility out to customers and get them to improve this with their feedback. And there's a screenshot from a sample internal customer there. Has this been worth all of the time? Because this is a huge project. I can't give you a quantitative analysis, but I can say this has made it much easier when somebody phones up saying something's wrong. It's made our billing processes a lot easier to follow, and it keeps us, like I say, more honest to SLAs because the customers can see it. We're quite obvious in putting that out now. The automation is saving time, and we're moving towards being able to help customers self-service. As I've already said, it's shone a light into some of the areas of our network where things maybe hadn't been documented quite as well as they should have, or maybe there weren't the line items maybe that should have been on some invoices. And it feels like a stronger foundation for us to actually grow and improve and expand services and spend our time pushing packets and spinning up VMs and helping customers. What's left to do? I've already said we've not yet got to the stage where we're going from pre-sales opportunity to spinning up the service there and then from the CRM. And part of the reason for that is looking at the other end of the life cycle. Should we have destructive operations be as simple as destroying a record in a database? And I suppose the corollary to that is, should it be as easy as someone clicking a button in a web control panel to destroy their server? I'm still feeling a little uneasy about that one. So we may make this a create-only system where manual removal of services still has to happen. We need to improve some of our integrations. For example, we're using the PGP email interface for talking to RIPE. And we need to close the loop. We need to get our customers to evaluate this and give us some hard stats. And that's, I think, where I'd like to take this within the next 6 to 12 months. And that's the end of my talk. Thank you very much for listening.
Really well. Do we have any questions for Marek at all? You all fallen asleep. Oh, there's a question. Brilliant. Charlie Bosso, if someone can...
I'm interested to know about your billing. Really boring, but do you use something separate for billing that you're pushing into, or are you generating invoices from your CRM?
Everything coming out of the CRM. Literally, it is the centre of everything. So for us, a bill is no different to an email newsletter, just it goes to one person. We are just sending them a bill with a bunch of invoices, and that then goes through the financial system within the CRM.
You don't have any scaling problems with invoicing?
We're small, so as yet, no.
Thousands of customers? Hundreds?
More hundreds of customers, yeah. But that may become an issue in time. The hope would be that we'd then migrate some of that to software as a service. The idea is we'd use a CRM, well, we are using a CRM where API is first-class citizen, so we just API out to payments handling service instead.
Right. I mean, the reason I ask was we once upon a time did it with Xero.
Yes.
And unfortunately, there's a limit to the number of invoices you can generate every month.
Yes.
So we use a horrendous external billing platform now which doesn't have an API, and it's all very manual. So it's good to hear someone's actually writing their own.
Yes. Thank you.
Any more for Marek?
Mike, but I have a question.
Go for it, Tim.
Tim Jones, I really like the ideas that you're doing there. I think having some kind of integrated health checks for the configurations of your services is really good. There's a lot of open, for example, DNS checkers out there, but to have something built in that gives you that report in your dashboard is really good. And I think one of the things I've liked with one of the ISPs I'm with is that they, for example, pushing SPF, and they detect whether you're using it or not, and if you're not using it, they try and make it a one-click, easy thing for you to do, that type of thing. So helping deploy useful things, I think, is a good thing.
I was, personally, I was quite curious whether or not you've thought about either opening this or selling it as a packaged product.
Potentially, yes.
I think there's probably quite a few small businesses that could benefit from it.
That could be the sponsor.
Sponsor talk next time. Okay.
Cracking. All right. Okie dokie. So thank you very much, Marek. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.